Hello everyone. Well, today is February 6, 2017, and today is my final day serving as an officer in the U.S. Army. I never once thought that this would be my last day serving, but the powers that be have decided that I am going to be involuntarily separated with an honorable discharge for the perception of an inappropriate relationship, as my congressman was told, not sexual in nature. To describe how that came about is a very long story. But I'm going to do my best to try and share it with you and to describe some real big issues that I have been made aware of throughout this entire ordeal. Where to begin, right? Well, on October 29th, 2015, I turned in a fellow flight school student named Lieutenant Robbie Jenkins in for cheating. Lieutenant Jenkins was second from the bottom in my bullet class, had a lot of issues going on with her that made her not very well liked in my class, but that is neither here nor there. And in the end, she was caught cheating on her exams by myself and a couple other students. One blatantly using her phone in her lap, another asking questions during the course. And, as she told me and several others, she was studying the questions that were provided to her by her then boyfriend, who was further along in flight training. So suddenly the girl who couldn't score any hundreds in Bullock all of a sudden was scoring perfect hundreds across the board in flight training. Well, during this time, a lot of helicopters were experiencing pilot error, as well as some mechanical problems. But we had a lot of crashes, and 2015 was a pretty bad year for Army aviation. It was a sad year for Army aviation, and to say that that didn't influence my decision to turn her in would be a bit of an understatement. For those of you that know me, you know that I don't tolerate such behavior. Many would refer to me as being the champion of right and not tolerating those who are morally inept. And with that, I turned her in. What happened as a result of turning her in, as well as her boyfriend who was still in training, has turned into a situation worthy of either a very bad daytime soap opera or a Lifetime TV movie. Lieutenant Jenkins was put under an investigation by the company commander of Delta Company, 1st of the 145th, here at Fort Rucker, Alabama. She was immediately pulled from training, and her investigating officer was a captain, Captain Vanderhayden, who also worked in our student management office. Quickly, myself and some of the other students who turned her in realized that something wasn't right with the investigation. Lieutenant Jenkins was talking about how she was having productive one-on-one meetings with both her IO and our company commander, something that a person who's under an investigation really shouldn't be having productive meetings, but what do I know? I'm just a lieutenant. Doesn't seem normal to me, but well, during the course of her investigation, She was told who her accusers were before the conclusion, and within 24 hours of after being read her rights, Lieutenant Jenkins decided to send me a threatening text message. Well, I should clarify, she sent it to my then stick buddy, giving a backhanded rumor, saying, "Be careful. Lots of rumors and BS is flying around among the class, including stuff about you and Whitney. And apparently someone in the class is desperate. I know you guys aren't doing anything wrong, but watch yourselves. I don't want someone trying to report anything on you two." And in that same breath, she sent me a text message saying, "I know what you did. I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want to talk to you." She then decided to show up at my house, where my mother met her at the door. She started doing the same slanders, threats, accusations, and my mom had to turn her away. Immediately, I attempted to contact Captain Vanderhayden at the Delta Company Student Management Office, and I said, "Sir, this is Second Lieutenant Lindsay. I'm very sorry to bother you during the weekend, but I need some professional advice. Lieutenant Jenkins is going around to our entire class trying to find out information, and she's posting about it on social media. Now she's sending indirect threats about rumors to my stick buddy. I just don't know how to approach this, and I'm afraid it will only get worse come Monday morning." Captain Houghton at Delta Company responded to my text saying that he would let the IO know. You would think that threatening to spread rumors, threatening to retaliate, and me bringing it to the chain of command's attention and actually having a text message proving that this happened, as well as those initial text messages where she threatened, would be sufficient enough to say, hey, if Lieutenant Jenkins comes in and states these things that she said before, that would be a red flag, right? No. You would be wrong, actually. Lieutenant Jenkins and her boyfriend were facing involuntary separation from the Army and were also given GOMARs. Permanent or local, I cannot confirm, but what she was telling everyone else, she was facing involuntary separation. So, in an act of desperation, she had to take out her primary accuser. One thing that's important for me to mention is when I say primary accuser, is I had dozens of text messages from Lieutenant Jenkins herself talking about not only the studying of the questions and things like that, but other moral character issues that came up when I was asked on the sworn statement if there were other things that Lieutenant Jenkins did that needed to be brought to the chain of command's attention. I couldn't lie, of course. I'm under oath. So I let them know about, how she was missing PT. She had a friend in the student management office who was signing her in. I had text messages from her, multiple text messages talking about how she couldn't show up that morning because she stayed out till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, drinking, going out on dates with guys, so she's failing to perform her duties, as well as text messages where she talked about her affair she had with a Jordanian officer in our bullet class while she was legally married. The list goes on and on. Well, Captain Vanderhayden called me in on November 14th, 2015. So not too long after the investigation began, but well enough into our productive one-on-one meetings where I was told that the text messages that I provided to them, which are from Lieutenant Jenkins herself, and you could back up with my thumb records to show that, these are indeed the text messages, we're not going to be used in the 15-6 investigation against her, and that he felt that me and the other females who spoke out against her were catty and jealous of this girl, who was second from the bottom in our bullet class and really no threat to any of us on the order of merit list, but who am I to say? And then said that we were jealous, but me in particular, that I wanted to take her off the OML because I didn't want her to be a threat. And he used a very particular term. He said something about spotlight. And this is very important later on. Well, immediately upon leaving, one of my parting words to Captain Vanderhayden was, "Sir, during the course of the investigation, I heard that Lieutenant Jenkins and her boyfriend were caught not showing up to PT," at which point he quickly responded by saying, "I don't know what that has to do with this." Well, she's observing behavior that is wrong for an Army officer to have, and she got caught doing it while she's under a 15-6 investigation. It's one of the very things that she got turned in for, right? Think that might be a character factor? No. The other thing he told me is he said the only reason why Lieutenant Jenkins had looked at the student handout and was asking questions in class is because during my crew coordination exam that was being taught by an individual named Brian Bashad, absolutely hilarious dude, politically incorrect, but hilarious nonetheless, he had left the room during our class, and that apparently because of him leaving the room, it allowed for a situation for her behavior to occur. Essentially, Vanderhayden's making every excuse under the book to judge her behavior as acceptable. Last time I checked as an officer, just because a situation comes up that is moral or immoral or wrong doesn't mean you just take the opportunity. I mean, even the private shouldn't do that, but I guess that's not for her. Well, immediately I sent a message to my husband describing the events in an email and asking for his advice. Once again, record, right? Well, in my flight school class, I was a top third. Same thing in my bullet class. I did all of this while being a geographically single parent in flight school. Not an easy thing to do. Didn't sleep a lot, had to sacrifice a lot, but I did it. I worked hard, and I selected the aircraft of my dreams, the AH-64 Echo, Apache helicopter. Well, on June 12th, 2016, Lieutenant Jenkins' plans to save her and her boyfriend's career went into motion. And she went into none other than Captain Vanderhayden and decided to make a sworn statement against me. Her sworn statement says that I falsely accused her, that I only did so to take the limelight, there's a buzzword for you again, limelight, spotlight, off of me and my assigned flight partner. So we made the accusation about her and her boyfriend. I don't know how that makes sense. For one, why would I make an accusation to take some sort of limelight, spotlight, whatever buzzword her and Captain Vanderhayden want to use at the time, by willingly bringing forth a text message from her dated on the 30th of or the 31st of October, talking about the threat of rumors going around about her and my assigned flight partner, my stick buddy. I willingly brought the spotlight on myself by sending a screenshot of that text message to the chain of command, particularly to Captain Vanderhayden. And he did absolutely nothing about it. Delta Company did nothing to stop the rumors. Captain Vanderhayden says, in his own words, that, Lieutenant Jenkins appeared to have been retaliating against me, but that she came in with multiple text messages confirming this alleged affair between my assigned flight partner and myself, and that, clearly I just wanted to take the spotlight, there's that word again, off of him and I to, throw basically her under a bus. But the thing that's so funny is that in Captain Vanderhayden's own sworn statement, he says that Lieutenant Jenkins is highly probable of having several inappropriate relationships, and that eventually that she admitted to not showing up to PT, which means that initially she lied to you, which is a UCMJable offense, especially if it's made on a sworn statement. But she had several inappropriate relationships, and that it was highly probable. Several inappropriate relationships. Remember that for later on. Well, these multiple text messages actually wasn't multiple, it was one. It was a self-generated text message to a friend of hers named Lieutenant Brennan Meehan. And it was generated only 4 hours before she came in to make her official sworn statement. What's really funny about this text message is, for one, there's no actual date on it at all. There's no verification that this is actually his number. And I say this because there's something very peculiar that comes out in my 15-6 investigation that is a result of this. So January 12th, 2016, I'm called in and read my rights as a result of one text message self-generated by the accuser, who I turned in for cheating, and she's trying to save her career. And Lieutenant Meehan states basically that he was straight up told about this alleged relationship a few weeks ago. Well, there's one problem with that. His actual sworn statement doesn't say that at all. His sworn statement says that he was told by my sick buddy that he found me attractive. Not that he was ever told of some alleged affair or something going on between the two of us. So text message statements don't add up. The investigating officer assigned to my case was named Captain Robert Sprague. Captain Sprague is good friends with Captain Vanderhayden, also from within my company, also from within the student management office, and sits right next to Captain Vanderhayden. When I was read my rights on January 12th, 2016, I looked at him straight in the eye and said this is a direct act of retaliation by Second Lieutenant Robbie Jenkins and a couple of her friends for me turning her in for cheating. He looked at me dead in the eye. This is before I was even told what the course of the investigation was about. And he said, I don't see what this has to do with any of that. Well, according to AR 15-6, actually looking at the validity of the claims of the accuser as an investigating officer is part of your job per the Army regulation. It's also part of your job to perform an unbiased investigation. The only people that Captain Sprague decided to actually question throughout the course of my 15-6 investigation was the accuser and the names brought forth by the accuser. Not a single party that I brought forth, my academic advisors, my instructor pilots, other members from my class that weren't mentioned by the accuser, my next door neighbors, anyone was actually questioned by my investigating officer. Should be a problem, right? Nope, you would be wrong. In March 2016, I was giving a GOMAR, General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand, and I was given the chance to rebut it. Well, to write my rebuttal, I decided that I was going to go and try to seek legal help. Well, Fort Rucker only has one trial defense attorney here to cover the entire installation. He couldn't see me. I tried 2 other military installations, Fort Benning and Fort Polk. They couldn't see me, which meant I didn't have any choice. I had to hire a civilian attorney out of pocket. This is one of the problems with the system that is going to be very important for you as a soldier when you figure out what I had to learn the hard way. So we'll get to that. So I hire an attorney. My attorney's pretty awesome. He's a civilian attorney, but he's also a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves as a JAG officer. Very knowledgeable. He looks at this Nothing but hearsay. There's literally no evidence. This is the evidence. Is a self-generated text message from the accuser less than 4 hours before she made a statement. And a couple of her friends who say that they were told by my stick buddy that he woke up naked next to me on the couch, but yet there's no dates, no times, no places. Like, seriously, no locations. There's no text messages talking about this alleged event from my stick buddy to these individuals or even amongst them. There's no photographs, no videos, no nothing. Nothing. And it's not verifiable even amongst themselves. Like I said, one of the individuals just says that my stick buddy was attracted to me. I can't help if someone's attracted to me. No one can. But, you know, there you go. So I'm giving my GOMAR, and I'm giving the evidence that was brought forth in this 15-6 investigation. Something catches my eye. And this is something actually that had nothing to do with me, but this was an accusation against my stick buddy himself for something to do with paying child support or some, I don't know. It's some additional claim, and I'm speculating because I don't know the background of this. But what makes this important is the fact that there's some text messages here that are screenshots from one of the individuals who decided to collaborate this story by Lieutenant Jenkins, and his name is Warrant Officer Mitch McMahon. During the course of my 15-6 investigation, we were given non-disclosure agreements. These non-disclosure agreements, you can't talk about anything to do with an ongoing investigation. You can't provide any details about the case. You can't provide nothing. Certainly can't speak with anyone outside the investigating officer and certain individuals within the chain of command, chaplain included. Well, one of these text messages from Mitch McMahon is less than 24 hours after he signed the non-disclosure agreement, at which point he says to another warrant officer who at this point had not been a part of the investigation and had not been read his rights, and even if he had been, Warrant Officer McMahon couldn't talk about this. It says, I was like the sixth person to get called in yesterday to give a statement. By the time they got to me, they already knew everything. They were just padding their resume. Everyone said the exact same thing too. This other warrant officer says, double fuck, man. They'll crawl up my ass if I make a statement that doesn't fit the story. Yeah. Tried to bring this forth to the chain of command, and I was told that that was just Warrant Officer McMahon expressing his perception of the 15-6 investigation. No, that's him violating the non-disclosure agreement. And actually, there's a couple more pages of him talking about the details of the investigation as well. But, you know, it's okay if you just have a perception, you know, of a thing. It's not your fault if it's just a perception, but, you know, who am I to say? So I go and I collect all this evidence. I mean, a lot of evidence. And I write a rebuttal with the help of my husband, who's also a service member, my attorney, who, Lieutenant Colonel in JIG, Army Reserve, and myself. And we come up with a 135-page rebuttal with 62 enclosures of evidence that include phone records, text messages, emails, character references, sworn statements. I even got a handwriting analysis that is used in criminal courts back in Washington State to actually analyze the handwriting to depict where people are lying or not being forthcoming. I mean, the whole 9 yards. I have emails in here. Emails from certain members of my chain of command asking me details about my visits with the chaplain, admitting to me that they were going to the chaplain and seeking information from them about my meetings with them, which is actually a violation of the law. But, you know, you think that these types of things would be, I don't know, worth asking me further questions about, or maybe doing side investigations for? Well, you would be wrong. My 135-page rebuttal with 61 enclosures of evidence that showed not only my innocence, but also the wrongdoing of others, proof that they did collaborate, that they did lie on sworn statements, which is too numerous for me to mention in the short duration of this video. Never asked me a single question. Chain of command didn't read it. Not a single word. Not a single word. Their statements in reference to my rebuttal were 1 to 2 sentences long. Didn't mention anything to do with any of the points brought forth in my rebuttal, or even gave any indication of why I should receive a General Officer Memorandum reprimand. Other than the fact that it was vague wording like, does not live the Army values, is unfit to lead soldiers. So, get notified that I'm going to be receiving a permanent file at Gomar. No point did anyone from my chain of command, from the company commander, battalion commander, brigade commander, all the way up to the CG himself, never called me into their office. Battalion commander canceled on me 4 times throughout the duration of this. No one asked me a single question. No one saw my face. In fact, battalion, brigade commander, and the CG never even heard my voice. Didn't even know what I looked like before they decided to end my career. Nothing. And I wasn't given the opportunity to actually brief myself to them, to talk with them about any of this, until the decision had already been made to permanently file a Gomar. Well, one thing you come to find is that when they file a Gomar, especially with the downsizing of the military, automatically you get put in for involuntary separation from the U.S. Army. Instantaneous. When you're in my position, such as a junior officer. On May 12th, 2016, I was told I was going to be involuntarily separated from the U.S. Army. But I'd be given the chance to rebut it. June 11th, so 30 days later, was when my rebuttal statement was due. And a rebuttal is something that you are actually giving per the regulations. Well, I wrote a rebuttal, per the guidelines of AR 600-8-24, wrote a statement, and then saw open door policies from every one of my chain of command, because at this point I was convinced that no one had actually read my rebuttal, that people were too busy and they just rubber stamped it, pushed it down the line. So as I'm going forth, writing this rebuttal, making my case that, hey, no one ever gave me a counseling statement saying that there was a perception of any inappropriate relationship between my flight partner and myself. If someone had brought forth this information, I could have been afforded the opportunity to correct it if it's a perception. But that never happened. That since the accusation came out, cut all ties talking to my assigned flight partner, and no other accusations of wrongdoing have come up. I've never been negatively counseled. I've never failed any written exam, never busted a check ride, never failed a PT test, never had problems with height and weight. There is nothing in my record indicating that I'm a bad soldier, and that when I was giving this information, I did everything within my power to fix it, but at that point it was too late because no one was paying attention. No one cared. I meet with my company commander. Find out from my company commander, he didn't read my rebuttal at all. In fact, he voluntarily removed himself from the process. I meet with my battalion commander. My battalion commander tells me that, oh, I'm going to pretend that I've never seen any of this before. So when you brief me things and I seem like I'm reading it, it's just because I want to afford you the chance to brief me. He didn't know anything I was talking about. Nothing. Colonel Hodgson didn't know a single thing that was in my rebuttal statement. He was devaluing statements made in the 15-6 investigation against me, saying that they didn't make sense, that they were poorly written, that, they didn't have any business being in there. And then he saw my evidence. All of it. He couldn't refute any of it. I spent 2 hours with him. And then he ended that conversation with me saying, hey, it might be too late, but maybe I can make a couple of calls and we can see what we can do. Brigade commander. Go in. Brief to him as well. I go my rebuttal. He tells me, quite frankly, looks at me and says, this looks bigger than what I remember. Turns to the command sergeant major. Doesn't this look bigger than you remember? And then he tells me, as I start going through the evidence, why didn't you bring this forth in your rebuttal? I look at him and I say, sir, this is an exact photocopy of my rebuttal. He didn't know it either. He tells me the same thing. Oh, we'll see what we can do. At this point, my attorney, who's a JAG officer, as I've mentioned several times before, contacts the CG directly saying that something's wrong. Your Fort Rucker legal office either A, was derelict in their duties and didn't actually provide her GOMAR rebuttal, because I talk about processes within the 15-6 investigation that violated AR 15-6, and that's a direct reflection on their product that they're putting forth in the legal office, and that there was concern that maybe some of this evidence got taken out of my rebuttal and the chain of command didn't see it, because why else would no one ask me about any of the things in here? CG put it back on the legal office to do an internal review, and then I get a sworn statement from Colonel Hodgson that comes about as a result of this 15-6, where he sits there and he states on a sworn statement to cover himself that he performed a thorough review of my rebuttal, that he read it at least 3 times, yes, 135 pages 3 times, and that he did so with my company commander. The timeline it took for my GOMAR rebuttal to be provided to the legal office to clear through battalion and on to brigade was 48 hours. It was 2 business days. 2 business days. 135 pages. Major Mack at the Fort Rucker legal office also made a sworn statement stating that my company commander was kept out of it due to allegations that I brought forth, such as the IO shouldn't have been brought within Delta Company, people that we know. He was also friends with Lieutenant Jenkins, IO. Maybe this is a conflict of interest. But that's where it gets interesting. My company commander said in an audio recording, which, by the way, every time I talk to someone within my chain of command, I recorded them. They weren't always aware of that. In fact, they were never aware of that, which is why they probably spoke so frankly with me. So I have them on audio recording saying this, and Major Mack on the sworn statement saying that the company commander wasn't involved. But then I have the battalion commander who says on a sworn statement that I have a copy of that he was trying to prove a point, that he thoroughly went through my rebuttal 3 times with the private audience of my company commander. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there, right? So we go through the process, and I try to use the CG's open door policy. Everyone's grooming me of what to say, the things that worked for them. I get all the way up to post headquarters. CG's not in the building anymore. He's gone. I go and I speak with the Deputy Chief of Staff first, who tells me that anytime he sees a female soldier with a male soldier, that 9 times out of 10, there's something going on there. That he can say that as a fact, almost fact, that anytime he sees a woman and a man together, that there's something going on. So females, sorry, we're outnumbered in the military. It's a mostly male world, so female platoon leaders, you're going to probably have a male, platoon sergeant, and same thing with commanders and, first sergeants or command sergeant majors. But, don't worry, the eyes of the Deputy Chief of Staff, you have a 1 out of 10 of not being viewed by him as doing something wrong. Because women, we can't control ourselves, heaven forbid. We have smaller brains or something like that, right? But the thing that's really interesting is that the Deputy Chief of Staff told me that because I got an attorney, that legally no one in my chain of command could hear my side of the story, and that's just an unfortunate fact. Remember how before I said, got an attorney, didn't know that my chain of command couldn't hear my side of the story, and that comes directly from the Deputy Chief of Staff. So you get an attorney, chain of command doesn't hear your side of the story. You get a permanent fellow, go more. Go figure, right? I don't need an attorney. When I read my rights, I said I have the right to an attorney. There's no fine print saying I have the right to the attorney. However, space, chain of command doesn't hear your side of the story. Maybe that should be in like small print somewhere when I'm reading my rights, but it wasn't. So then I get to the Chief of Staff. Chief of Staff didn't say anything too outlandish, but he told me that the ship has sailed, CG made his decision, couldn't be brought back. And he told me that there's no appellate court for this. Doesn't matter if no one read the rebuttal. It doesn't matter any of that. Once a decision is made, the shot's been fired, you can't take it back. So it was too late. Defeated, I leave. They wouldn't let me see the CG because, Chief of Staff told me that I gained nothing from seeing the boss. That wasn't worth 15 minutes of his time, which is what my chain of command said that I would get from the CG, but I'm just one of his soldiers. I don't need 15 minutes of his time. Destroyed my career, involuntarily separated, never saw my face, never heard my voice. Good to know that means so much, right? Well, at this time, gotta remember my separation rebuttal is due June 11th. I get a letter in the mail from the Department of the Army Suitability and Evaluations Board. They're the reviewing authority that's supposed to review any information that comes down, like GOMARS, involuntary separation. It'll go through CG's level, go through HRC, and then it's supposed to go to this board. So the CG filed, well, not directly, his people filed for the involuntary separation actions against me on May 12th. My rebuttal was due on June 11th, which is afforded under the Army regulations. But on May 17th, he sent my involuntary separation paperwork to the Department of the Army Suitability and Evaluations Board. On May 17th. My rebuttal wasn't even due until June 11th. So when they say that they don't get to hear your side of the story, they mean it. They sent my involuntary separation paperwork before my Army regulated rights to submit a rebuttal. Admittedly, I go into action. I get my Congressman, the Honorable Rick Larson of Washington State, involved. He submits an inquiry to Fort Rucker. First one, Fort Rucker doesn't respond. Hails him again. Second time, Fort Rucker doesn't respond. Third time, Fort Rucker responds to my Congressman's office and says that my involuntary separation, due to the perception of an inappropriate relationship, is quote-unquote, albeit not sexual in nature. I'm being involuntarily separated because not because of these accusations that seem to be brought forth by Lieutenant Jenkins and her little buddies to save her career, which, by the way, she was able to save her career, ended up getting through flight school at the bottom of her class, you know. Well, I was so jealous of her bottom of the class. You're so right, Captain Vanderhayden. That was definitely a thing. Whatever. That my congressman was told that I was being separated because I carpooled with my stick buddy and I studied with him. We're told here, don't study alone. If you study alone, odds are you're going to fail. That's what the stats say. They recommend carpooling because parking is limited in some of these areas. But more importantly, I'm a geographically single mother, which means my 6-year-old child needs to be in bed at a certain time. My days are long enough. You know, I have to maximize my time the best I can. So carpooling, which I also did with other people too, to include my first stick buddy I had for my first 8 weeks of training, did the exact same thing with, but no one seemed to care about that, and there was no perception of an inappropriate relationship with him. You know, trade off on asking 5 and 9 questions. With study sessions, I had tons of text messages in here as group text messages with multiple people from my class, male and female. We would all come to my house and study. I had study sessions of up to 8 people at times. But no one says anything to that, and I have proof of it. Inappropriate relationship, whether you're dealing with TRADOC regulation, Department of the Army, it doesn't matter. There's like 5 different places that you can see this reference for an inappropriate relationship, which could be defined as an inappropriate relationship itself or the perception of one. I don't even fall into that category because we're both officers. Neither one was in a supervisory position over the other. We were both students, so you didn't have one teacher, one student, one cadre, one student. And oh, by the way, marital status is not a factor of consideration with an inappropriate relationship. But I was told by legal staff they had to get me with something. You don't have to get me with anything. You don't just make up something like, oh, there's this, round hole. We're going to fit a square peg through it. For what? To save Lieutenant Jenkins. Got it. And then you get sneaky. Everyone's too busy in the chain of command. They believe the lowest denominator, which is coming from the investigating officer. No one's double checking their work, so they rubber stamp, push it down the line. And then the Fort Rucker legal office isn't affording me my chance of due process to actually rebut things by submitting stuff early to the board, violating, AR 600-8-24. And you can't make this stuff up. So I get my congressman involved. Congressman's upset, sends a joint letter up to the Department of the Army, the Secretary of, Manpower and Personnel and Reserve Affairs, saying, hey, we're concerned here. We're allowing all females to serve in all these different, branches of the Army now. You're saying women can't be trusted with men? Don't you think this is going to play a huge role? Like, literally, this is the verbiage that goes up for my congressman in a joint letter to the Department of the Army, which the Department of the Army didn't respond to until the 11th hour. And by the 11th hour, after they already decided to involuntarily separate me. Never actually performing a investigation to my congressman's concerns. So, apparently, Department of the Army doesn't have to, answer the Congress. That's something else I learned too. Well, during this time, I also decided to submit a claim up to the Department of the Army IG office. Because of the ranking of the individuals involved, it had to go up to the Department of the Army level. I get assigned a civilian investigator named Mr. Terry Freeze. I bring forth this nice little packet of evidence, as well as thorough answers to his questions with nice little graphs. And I get a call from the director of the Department of the Army Suitability and Evaluations Board. And he starts off by saying, I just want to assure you that we got all 30 pages of your rebuttal and that we're going to be reviewing it. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. 30 pages. Yes, ma'am. My rebuttal is 135 pages. Light bulb goes off, right? We go into panic mode, and I sent him an email with a digital copy of my 135-page rebuttal. At which point the director of the Department of the Army Suitability and Evaluations Board tells me that all of my enclosures, those 62 enclosures, were missing. Fort Rucker Legal Office decided to take out all of my evidence when they sent it up to the board early, mind you. But he assured me that his legal staff was going to take a look at it and, calls me back the next day and says, hey, look, we reviewed the 15-6 against you. It's clearly nothing but hearsay. He asked what happened to Lieutenant Jenkins. I explained the situation. He said how wrong that was and that, my rebuttal was strong. But however, I can't get my hopes up because he nor his legal staff actually are voting members of the board. But I sit there and I get hope, thinking, they're going to read it. Great. Someone's finally going to listen to me. Yeah. So, I waited. June. I waited. And I waited to hear from this board. December 2016, just before Winter Exodus, I get a letter back from the board saying that they couldn't actually review any of my evidence, and they sent it all back to me in a nice little packet, saying that because the date timestamp hadn't been 1 year since the GOMAR was given to me, that no action had been taken, but when 1 year elapsed, I could have them review my stuff again. It took them that long to tell me that they couldn't read my stuff. I'm being involuntarily separated from the Army because I was told by my chain of command I wasn't promotable. I wasn't promotable because they barred my promotion. So they didn't actually have to involuntarily separate me. They barred my promotion to involuntarily separate me, push it down the tracks, right? I tried to get the Fort Rucker IG office involved. Fort Rucker IG office told me that they couldn't help me because my congressman had already had an open inquiry. An open inquiry that Fort Rucker just kept ignoring. So at that point, you know, Fort Rucker IG doesn't do anything. But the Army doesn't have to respond to my congressman or even really do a thorough investigation at all, or any investigation for that matter. So there's no action. That's what they told me in this letter here. So a week and a half ago, I was told that I was being voluntarily separated and that the paperwork came through. I was given 14 days to clear this installation. Throughout this process, I've learned a lot. I have gathered lots of evidence, as well as countless hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of audio recordings. But no one listened. No one cared enough to listen. And for a year, I sat in purgatory. I was told I was unfit to lead soldiers. So I had to find a purpose. My purpose, I found with honors detachment. It gave me meaning to my life, to serve the families of soldiers who had fallen either as, you know, of old age, self-infliction, or medical, you name it. For 11 months of those 12 months, I found purpose there. I put a smile on my face. I worked my butt off, you know, to make sure things were done right, to motivate people, and almost everyone there had no idea that there was something going on with me. And they'd asked me about, you know, start dates and my next phase of training. I just, you know, laugh it off. Oh, you know, I don't know. Because I didn't want them to know. Because that detracts from the mission. Even when I found out that I was being involuntarily separated, even though there's that hope that maybe someone would listen and the trains would stop on the tracks, I still gave it my all. Never failed to report, perform my duty, train soldiers, led soldiers, mind you. I became a lead trainer, I became a staffer, because I knew my self-worth. They didn't at first because they didn't bother to get to know me before they made these decisions, and I wasn't going to let that define me. It's also the closest thing I was ever going to get to leading a platoon, and I knew that. So I treated it like that was my time. Towards the end, they realized I was a hard worker. Members of my chain of command told me I was a good soldier, told me they appreciated me, and you know, some people even said that they were sorry. But it didn't matter because once that shot was fired, no one could take it back. So here's the problem that we see. There's all these different institutions, measures in place that are supposed to be a check and balance on each other. These systems are overburdened. There are too many soldiers who are going through problems right now and not enough people to do quality control checks. So they just get pushed down the line. Even commanders themselves are burdened with so much to do. Does that make it any less wrong when they rubber stamp something so carelessly? No. But they all do it. You also have a legal system in place that still has UCMJable actions that refer to sodomy when we allow gays to serve. These codes need to be updated. And I'm sorry, preponderance of the evidence, which is what you do in a GOMAR, I never got a judge. I never got a jury. My judge, jury, and executioners was a biased IO and an overburdened chain of command that never saw my face, and a legal system that did everything in their power to try and cover their own butts because they didn't perform things as per the regulation. And no one oversaw that. No one heard any of my evidence that I had to present. Things need to change. A GOMAR is considered an administrative action, but it's an administrative action that can destroy your career. And there's nothing you can do about it. I understand that sometimes commanders want to make it so they can give a lesser out to soldiers instead of going through, court-martials and all that stuff, but it's a system that can easily be abused. And I have read so much online of all of these people, particularly survivors of sexual assault, who are being given GOMARs as acts of retaliation by people. And that's wrong. I want to see GOMARs gone. I want to see UCMJ's code updated, because a lot of these things, someone wants to have sodomy with each other. I mean, why is that the Army's concern? What people do in their bedroom with each other, it's not a concern of the Army anymore. It shouldn't be. And there's many things on the books that, at the end of the day, do not affect the good order and discipline of the unit and really aren't the concerns. And if you simplify it, you reduce the measures that people can retaliate against, because at the end of the day, people look one way for certain individuals they like, and then they hammer those who don't. And most of these people that we see as, war heroes, you look at the Pacific or you look at Band of Brothers, you watch those series, you can name off dozens of things that these individuals could have been UCMJ'd for, but they weren't, because no one wanted to. And that's a problem. So if you share this video, I want people to share their stories. I want these laws to change. I'm not going to be able to help internally in the military anymore, which is why I wanted to serve in the first place, but I'll be damned if they're going to stop me from helping soldiers. So I'm going to continue to fight for their rights, for their freedom, to give them a better environment on the outside, and I'm going to have to do so through politics. Different form of public service, but that's the avenue I'm going to take. And I implore those of you to heed some of the things as my words of advice to you. Always follow what your chain of command says. Don't do that. If you violate orders, no, you don't do that. The Army is still a great place, and it's still full of great people. But each one of you who are in the service as leaders, you can make a better environment for your soldiers by not allowing for these toxic environments and for these processes to railroad people. And for females, you need to look out. And this is men too. I mean, men can be retaliated against just as much as female. This isn't a gender-specific thing. So ignore my previous statement. Look out for yourselves too. And share your stories. The more people we get talking about this, the better it's going to be for everyone, because that's how change is going to occur. Originally, I was going to keep this video at 20 minutes. It's been an hour. So I apologize for that. This is the abbreviated version of the events that occurred over this last year. But I don't see any other way to tell this. I'm heartbroken. You know, there's no other way to describe that. But the story is worth sharing. It's not right. So, everyone out there, do something, take action, and hopefully we can elicit change so other individuals don't have to go through what I went through in the future. Thank you for your time.